Intercept just ran that Glenn Greenwald wrote, where he was, there was this dude, Sean Musrobian. He's from this YouTube channel, the Back channel, but he was on Glenn Greenwald's YouTube show.
Oh, the System Update.
The System Update, yeah. And they were talking about that guy's tweet thread where he talked about how, Joe Rogan's emerged as like this enemy of the liberal class, the liberal media of MSNBC, even though almost all of the values that he subscribes to as an individual are liberal ideas. And how it's this like new age of like cultural sort of almost, it's like cultural conservatism, but not in the way that we've come to understand cultural conservatism, because the way we've come to understand cultural conservatism would be like opposing to like gay marriage or, being anti-choice when it comes to abortion. Both positions, Joe Rogan would find himself on the quote unquote left liberal side of socially, but it's rather his his lewd behavior, his like boorish jokes, his kind of oafishness, and
stance on guns too. His gun stance is the one instance
hunting,
where he could be considered
the MMA
a
thing.
right-winger.
I think it's just all of those things that make him, and also I think it's fair to mention his let's say unsensitive comments towards the trans community. And while he has come out on multiple occasions and said that he does support trans adults right to make their decisions, I think that it's also fair to say that he wasn't the most sensitive or well informed on the matters, but he was drawing very sweeping and oftentimes
I agree.
Could be harmful conclusions about gender dysphoria with sources that I think are often at times come with poor intentions. But at the end of the day, I don't think Joe Rogan necessarily is the kind of guy with poor intentions, and I think that it's his own like his inability to fit into any box. Like, he's not a conservative, he's not a liberal, he's not going to he's not going to color inside the lines on any of those kinds of labels or parameters that makes him kind of like an interesting target. And it's one of those things that you and I were talking about this earlier. Like, when I first started listening to the Joe Rogan podcast, when I was probably like a senior in high school, I got put onto it by a bunch of stoner dudes that I worked with at a late night pizza place. And they were like, oh, check out this guy. Like, he's got like these crazy paleontologists on, and you should hear about Göbekli Tepe. It's like this crazy society that like didn't happen. And now it's like humans are way older than they used to be. And like, you should check it out, bro. And like, it was so not what the show has evolved into now, it seems like.
I don't know. I feel like the show gets like, the reason why people hear about the politics stuff is because it just gets so covered, where no one's covering the episodes about aliens and the episodes about science and stuff. So I feel like the reason why it seems like Joe Rogan is really waded into politics so much is because of the fact that the media now just has this like laser spotlight on him, and everything he says or does they pick up with and run with. Because
ever since the Bernie thing.
Yeah, because in 2016 he wasn't, and I didn't even really start like watching Joe Rogan until maybe a year or two ago. Not that I watch like regularly, but he wasn't really on my radar until like maybe a couple of years ago. But I do remember in 2016 he had Gary Johnson on the podcast.
Yeah, I listened to that podcast.
He was kind of dabbling in like libertarian third party thought. He had Jesse Ventura on the podcast too in 2016 and urged him to get in the
And he'd had Jank on in the past, and he'd had Anna Kasparian on in the past, and also Abby Martin was an old-time visitor on the podcast, regular
so he
almost.
Had waded into
Shane Smith,
politics.
Founder of Vice, was on the podcast pretty frequently back in the day.
People like that. So he definitely had political thought, and he was definitely intrigued by the whole Trump phenomenon and clearly the Bernie thing too, which is what got him into so much heat, or at least got Bernie into so much heat. And I agree, there have been some insensitive comments, especially on the trans stuff. It took him a weird amount of time to like come around to the fact that like trans people exist and that they're normal human beings, and you know what I'm saying. Like
it was just like a little antiquated and a little kind of like okay, dude.
I understand why the trans community like feels like, why does he spend so many hours of his podcast like dissecting our community with something he really has no understanding of or like experience with? You know what I'm saying? Like, I get that, but also I get that he's a comedian, shit talker that talks for a living, and some insensitive stuff's probably gonna come out, some ignorant stuff is probably gonna come out. So I'm not trying to, I don't believe in cancel culture. I don't believe in, because he had one wrong opinion, he can't speak anymore. It's just something that I disagree with him on, and hope he continues to evolve on.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and and also like at the end of the day, kind of like in the same way where we talked about it, and we were both a little irritated by his coverage where he like was passing on that story of the like supposedly left-wing activists were setting fires in Oregon or whatever. It's just kind of like he just almost feels like he's like not informed at all. Like I don't know. It's hard, and maybe this is just me because it feels like it's really hard for me to take Joe Rogan seriously on issues that come to politics, just because I just think of him as like a trippy stoner like guy. Like I never like go to him as like my source for information. Like it's kind of like everything he's saying is off the cuff and like, okay, yeah, Jamie Google stuff, but like, you know what I mean? I'm not going to him as like a news source. And I almost wonder if like he's like leaning into that role, or if they're just because I don't watch the show at all anymore. I used to watch it a lot.
I don't think he's leaning into it. I think like,
or is it just like people are responding to that element of his show in a way that they never have before?
I think it's that. I mean, I think I think he would definitely agree to moderate the debate, like he said, because I think he ultimately knows it would be a huge boon for his, name recognition, popularity. And that's another thing that I wanted to bring up, which is just like with what we're seeing with him at Spotify right now, which is essentially this band of employees, coming together to say like, we're going to cause a ruckus here at Spotify unless we have editorial control over Joe Rogan's content, saying that they're going to, threaten to quit or whatever if Joe Rogan isn't censored. And this is a, outrageous story from a couple of angles. And, we could sit here and talk about how annoying it is and outrageous it is that these, stupid social justice warrior, whatever people at Spotify are trying to censor Joe Rogan. That's one angle. But in my opinion, the more annoying angle is that Joe Rogan, took this $100 million deal from Spotify and then pretended like it was because YouTube was censoring him that he was moving to Spotify, knowing damn well.
Yeah, it's funny. As an old school listener of Joe Rogan, I remember back in the day when he was talking a lot of shit on Spotify and talking about how they, what the fuck would I go on there for? Like, what do they pay you? Like, they don't give shit to the people that are actually making the content. Like, we all know this was about your paycheck, and we all know that you moved to Texas to not pay the fucking California state tax because there's no income tax at the state level in Texas.
Despite spending years bitching about YouTube censorship and how the culture of censorship was coming for everyone, you knowingly took this deal for the money, knowing that you were going to be censored at Spotify. So like, in my opinion, that's kind of put me off of Joe Rogan lately. Just like, it just kind of makes me uneasy, and it feels like he's kind of a sellout more than ever. Not more than ever. I never really viewed him as a sellout, but now I kind of do, is because it's like he took this deal and now he's going to like have to sacrifice the quality of the show.
Well, yeah, what his whole brand was is I don't give a fuck. I'm not going to go anywhere where anybody tells me what to do. I was on a sitcom in the 90s. It was terrible. I was on Fear Factor. It was terrible. Like, I'm going to do my own thing and like be on this own bullshit. And that was like any level of respect that I had for Joe Rogan originated from the fact that here's a guy that sat down in front of a microphone and built the fucking biggest broadcasting empire. And not even an empire, but just literally just him fucking broadcast and getting like an empire, meaning like a massive audience, not like a corporation or some sort of thing. This is literally like, it was like indie to the 10x and then or to the 1 million X. And then for him to sell out to Spotify and basically give up all of that other shit, it's like, why?
Yep, and they took down like the Alex Jones episode and some other. I mean, I don't really care about Alex Jones, but they took down some weird ones too.
Well, yeah, but it's the principle of censorship, right?
And they took down like the Tommy Chong episode, weird stuff like that, where I'm like, why would Joe Rogan even like let them do this? Why would this be something you're okay with?
I wonder why they took down the Tommy Chong episode. I listened to both of those and I liked them both.
I remember there was like a semi-questionable homophobic-ish joke in the beginning of the Tommy Chong joke, but I don't think it would be enough to like remove.
I'm sure Tommy Chong has said some problematic shit. I mean, he's had Ben Shapiro on his fucking podcast like 10 times. And I mean, he had Milo on his podcast. Like,
there's plenty of like homophobic, stuff in culture that's on Spotify, whether it's music or podcasts or whatever. Like, I'm not defending it in any way, but like, it's weird that they would take out that because of one joke when so much else is on the internet and so much else is on Spotify. It's just a bizarre situation to me. And also, I have no interest in watching shit on Spotify. I don't know about you, but I'm not gonna watch the
Yeah,
Joe
I was
Rogan
wondering
on
about that. Are they going to
Spotify.
take the video clips off YouTube? Because at that point, Joe
No.
Rogan is just going to like evaporate from my
They're
fucking radius
staying.
of
They're
like.
keeping the clips on YouTube, but from I think starting next year or something, you can only watch the like actual episodes on Spotify.
Oh, like they're not gonna have the like. Yeah, at that point, like I will never watch another Joe Rogan again. I'd really
Yeah,
fallen off for me anyway. Like I wouldn't watch it, but
maybe
like
if like
maybe.
yeah, maybe if like David Lynch came on the program, then I would watch the full episode. But
I
like
mean,
until
yeah, I
someone
like
like
watching
that,
because I mean for large fan watching the UFC and shit. So occasionally I will tune into Joe Rogan's fight commentary, although he's not my favorite MMA commentator.
yeah.
You know, so, but like at that point, like like it's I don't know, he's slowly falling out of my realm of perception. It feels like, but it's almost like he's re-entering it in a different way, in a way that it was never a part of my life before. Where it's like I'm reading news articles about Joe Rogan.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird. And like I said in a previous
Like I
segment
feel
on
like
this,
8 months ago, the most you saw about Joe Rogan on the news was like when I read that Slate piece that was like a hit piece on him of like 8 months ago.
well, yeah, I mean, it's the same now. It's just on an amped up scale. It seems like, as I said, everything he says or does is under a magnifying glass, and they're just waiting for him to say the wrong thing. And I mean, you could be okay with that or whatever, but in my opinion, the real reason they don't like Joe Rogan, it's not because he's said questionable things about trans people. It's not because he's made some problematic jokes or said the N word in the past. That's not why they actually care. The reason they really want to silence Joe Rogan is because he does have people like Tulsi Gabbard on, people like Bernie Sanders and Andrew Yang, third party people like Gary Johnson in 2016. He's actually, giving the spotlight to people that are trying to challenge the establishment. And he gives spotlights to people like Kyle Kalinske and Jimmy Dore, who are actually giving perspectives and that run media outlets that are
And speaking of
challenging.
Andrew Yang probably owes his entire
Yeah,
fucking
straight up.
career to Joe Rogan right now. And
Literally.
it's
Yeah.
interesting. You can even trace it back probably further, and this will show exactly what kind of a nerd I am. I'm actually a big fan of the writer Eddie Wong. Who, for
Yeah.
listeners who aren't familiar with him right off the bat, if there was an ABC sitcom based off of his memoir, Fresh Off the Boat, he's a writer, chef, personality kind of a guy, but he's got some interesting writing and some interesting ideas. And when I was younger, he was one of the first dudes that kind of pricked my attention on some of the more like leftist kind of out there ideas. But back I want to say closer to 2016, he went on Joe's show and he was talking about UBI and they were arguing about it. And Joe was like, oh, people are just going to be masturbating in the streets and like fucking pissing on cars. And Eddie Wong was like, nah, dude, it's not going to be like that. It's not going to be like that. Like you got to give people like security so that they can like start their own shit and thrive. And Joe was like, well, maybe we'll see. And then now come Andrew Yang. And I'm pretty sure that's why he had Andrew Yang on, this guy that's running on UBI. And
Andrew Yang pretty much changed Joe's mind. Like I remember kind of watching it happen. At first, he was, like you said, very skeptical of the idea, and then after having some conversations, came around to the, like the utility of it, essentially.
Yeah, and so I think that there is a lot more to it. This isn't just like some conservative right winger that he's often portrayed as in these very reductive conversations. So obviously you and I, I'm sure both have could, if we were trying to offload a massive number of criticisms on his opinions and things that we disagree with, but I feel like there also are things where he needs to be lauded and he never is given any credit for the multiple
one of the most worshipped people in all of media,
of his show.
One of the most worshipped men, idolized politicians of all time is John McCain, who famously said, I'll always hate the gooks or something to that effect after
racial slur against
years
Vietnamese
after serving in the fucking war. And this man that's never brought up. It's never mentioned. He gets fawning media coverage. His wife just endorsed Joe Biden and is considered this huge deal.
His daughter, isn't his daughter on The View?
No, that's you're right. Meghan McCain. His daughter's on The View. But yeah, and then Joe Rogan, and that's why I said they don't actually care about the transphobic comments. They don't actually care about the racial slurs that he's used before. They cherry pick those moments out of hours and hours of conversations that
fuck, they're running Joe Biden for president. Of course they don't care about his racial fucking.
Yeah, but it's just it's so hypocritical that the same people that wet themselves over Joe Biden and how great he is. Like you mentioned, who's a notorious racist, someone who's had a foul mouth, who continues to have a foul mouth even as he campaigns for president. They laud that person, but then consider Joe Rogan undesirable because he's like I said, challenged their orthodoxy. And like when he had Barry Weiss on the program and brought up Tulsi Gabbard, and she just kind of she's like, what? Like,
You called her an Assadist toady. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And then all these people who are like, oh, she was just nervous. It's like, oh yeah, she was just nervous, so she forgot her entire
She was
fucking
just
argument
nervous
that she'd
because
made on Twitter.
Yeah, because her entire argument against Tulsi Gabbard wasn't a legitimate argument. It was just it had been absorbed from the groupthink of New York Times people, which is that Tulsi Gabbard was bad and a Saudi toady for some reason. They
An
can't tell you
Assadist
why.
toady, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, because, yeah, well, yeah, for sure.